You live in the area?
I grew up there in Northern Virginia, about 10, 12 miles outside of the nation's capital. And my dad was a bellman in a hotel in downtown D.C. So I stayed there until I was 24, and when I enlisted in the Navy, and the Navy got me here to Jackson.
That's what brought you here.
All right.
Steve Burnett.
Position that you seek.
Absolutely.
And why?
Steve Burnett, and I'm running for City Council at large, Group 1. And just like in 1976, when I got a little dose of patriotism because I was at a point in my life where I could serve and enlist in the Navy. I've been kind of involuntarily retired due to a business that I got too big, took a business partner, and then we collapsed the business. Actually, what I owned is now owned by corporate, was franchises of Jackson U.S. Tax Service. But our mutual assured destruction gave me the involuntarily retired status. And when Ronnie Fussell decided not to run for another term this past September, I felt like my qualifications, and the fact is that today, finally, you don't have to promise people a bigger government, I don't think, to get elected, because I would not have run with that kind of a promise. I think finally you get some traction by standing for more responsibility and a bolder, leaner government, which is what my campaign slogan is, for a bolder, leaner Jacksonville.
Now, before I get to the common questions that we're asking every single candidate, you're in a race where one of your opponents made a jump from a district race into your race.
District 12, Doyle Carter was going to beat him anyway. So.
Yes, despite the fact perhaps that he was lending
lots
himself
of
at
money.
least $200,000 in order to engage in the race. How do you hope to overcome what I perceive might be a financial advantage on the part of this candidate? It doesn't. This doesn't really bear
well, it's a
anything to
realistic
this,
question. I mean, absolutely realistic question. I believe in guerrilla marketing. I did that in my business world. I'm getting out to different organizations, despite the fact the chamber chose not to endorse me. I believe one of the reasons was because they can only think in terms of money. But I still have been going to lots of chamber events, Southside Businessmen's Club today, the Heckscher Drive Community Club last night. I'll be going to St. Nicholas's Historical Society next week. I mean, I'm doing my best to cover all of Duval County and meet and greet and see people. I think that's a positive end. I'm open to trying to raise money, but you know, that's not the first thing I ask people. I ask them for my vote, and I've raised a little over $3,000, about $1,500 mine. But I'm just out there meeting and greeting and telling who I am and what I stand for, and you know, I still believe in democracy in the voting booth. And W.C. Gentry proved when he ran for city council a few years ago, you can't necessarily buy a seat on city council. It was a similar type of a David and Goliath type of a situation back then. So I hope I turn out and can do as well. I believe that I'm a better candidate than my opponent that has raised all that money. And if you look at it, the majority of it is his money or closely connected people with him as well. I just don't happen to have that kind of ability to put it in there.
Okay. Now, I'll return to our question.
Yes, sir.
What do you consider to be the core functions of local government?
Well, I mean, public safety has got to be number one. Infrastructure and the care and feeding of that infrastructure. You don't just build it and forget about it. You have to build it and maintain it as well. An equal opportunity for education for all the citizens. I say that three just because the school board's a separate entity, the way that we're structured in Jacksonville. I mean, I really think that's a pretty top, but I'm looking at it from a candidate standpoint for city council, and what I would primarily have control over, although there's some ties to the school board through the city there. Those are the core, as well as parks and recreation. I think in getting out and meeting and greeting people I never had kids. I've been married 31 years, 1 year less than Mr. Rubio, but I never had kids, so parks and recreation, and I've always kind of worked through my life, wasn't a big thing for me, but getting out and doing my campaigning, that has risen up on my list as well. So those are the core functions and what the city government ought to focus on. It's just like the U.S. federal government ought to focus on the core things and not do all the things that aren't good, or all the things that they're not chartered to do. It's crazy.
Now, what specific savings do you think that we can find in upcoming city budgets? And we're looking for true specifics, such as in public safety or from the Jacksonville Journey, JEDC, Children's Convention, Cultural Council, special events, whatever. Just as specific as you can.
Well, I don't think that the city government has any business spending the taxpayers' money on all the different things that it's spending money on. God bless the people that have done some work on the journey, and that's all well and good. But I also saw a lot of people participating in the journey that were there because their nonprofit group wanted to profit from the journey. And one of the things that sticks in my craw in the city is how many nonprofits exist to pay salaries to their executives, and you don't see them out working the hours that volunteers work in those organizations. They're only there when they're getting paid for it. But anyway, so nonprofits, I think, need to be looked at and screened better. I definitely think that you can do things like the carpool could be potentially privatized. I mean, there's a whole different list of things out there that the city could do better. The city council is the board of directors, and the city council needs to be directing the strong mayor, which is how our city is set up. And I agree with Mr. Rubio. You don't say, like Mr. Bishop did, an across-the-board cut. But what you do say is, Mayor, your budget is 5% higher than what we're going to approve. Go back and with your department heads that get paid pretty darn good and ought to be given the task and be able to trim a budget, and go back and, Mayor, you prioritize what you want to cut, where you want to cut it, but when you bring it back to City Council, we want to see a 5% less spending than what you had before. Because I don't think on City Council that any of us would have the expertise to go through it line by line and cut things. But just one more thing in that area, I am a big one before I would vote on any issue, whether it's for spending or an ordinance, to ask, should the city government even be involved in this or not? I see so many times you get caught up in the media frenzy on some things, and somebody wants to create a new law to ban texting because the media frenzy today is on texting. Well, there's already ordinance that says distracted driving carries a pretty heavy fine. I think that covers texting pretty well. I don't know. I don't know why we have to keep on adding more and more laws on top of more and more laws. I'm not an attorney, so I've got a master's in business, so I don't get into that. But I think that we can repeal laws. Did you know it's I believe a $200 fine? It is $200 fine for spitting on the sidewalk in Jacksonville. Do you ever think it gets enforced? Do you think anybody cares? We need to, as City Council, look at some ordinances and see whether they're really still necessary or not. Get rid of the ones that aren't. See whether or not they're giving us the intended consequences or not, because too many times we get unintended consequences from things as well. So not only in the spending area, but just plain in just making life so that people can have a clear direction. We have so muddied the waters for people, they no longer have a real moral compass so that they know which way they need to be going, because we have so many different things. You have to be an attorney to live your daily life today. Are any of you attorneys, by the way? I was afraid when in Jacksonville, I believe 1 out of 4 people are attorneys. I could be wrong on that, but
if you came from Northern Virginia, they really are.
That is true. Yes, sir.
Conrad.
What do you believe is the solution to the city employee pension problem, and what steps would you take as a council member to work toward that solution?
Well, I think the Navy retired me too young. I didn't select for lieutenant commander, so I was retired at 20 years effectively, and was 44. I'd have continued to serve and work. I think we retire people too young, and I think that's borne out by the fact that we seem to rehire them so many times. I see all these people that I thought were retired, and then the next thing I know, I see them working for the sheriff again. And I'm saying, well, what's up with this? I thought you were retired. Well, no, I'm collecting that retirement, but I'm retired. So, you know, that certainly is something that needs to be looked at, as the age as well as the double dipping on that. Everybody else but the government has defined contribution instead of defined benefits. I think most people agree that we need to change on that. I would have in the military contributed to a retirement. In fact, I'm sorry that we didn't have the thrift savings plan when I was in there like the current guys do and gals do in the military. I'd have certainly contributed to that. You have to take responsibility for yourselves. And last but not least, a good friend of mine who used to serve on city council that will remain nameless, but to try to bridge this funding gap because the city skipped payments on the pension plan, he had proposed a few years ago to people, and it never gained any traction, to do a land swap. You know, a lot of these pension funds do better than the city does with land or property. I mean, the Jake Godbold building downtown is owned by the pension fund and then leased back to the city. You know, so that's an example. And his idea was to do some land swap with the pension fund at Cecil Field and let the pension fund do some development out there at Cecil Field. And in exchange for, of course, decreasing the deficit. Now, that was in some better real estate days when he talked about that, but I was just surprised that nobody ever thinks a little bit out of the box on some of this stuff. The city, in my estimation, has far more land than what the city government really needs to have. But excuse me.